In today's video, the Dwarf Giants Blood Bowl team battles the necromantic power of the Champions of Death as we play an old school game of Blood Bowl 2nd Edition from 1988. Well, hi folks, this is Lee from SkirmishWarGames.com. Welcome to the channel. I'm here with Lynn.
Hello.
And today is November 15th, 2020, which means in about 12 days or so, Games Workshop is going to be releasing Blood Bowl 2nd Season, which is the latest incarnation of their long-running fantasy football tabletop miniatures game. And to commemorate that, Lynn, do you know what we're going to do?
Play some Blood Bowl.
We are going to play some classic Blood Bowl. This is Blood Bowl 2nd Edition, not to be confused with 2nd Season, but classic Blood Bowl 2nd Edition from 1988. I actually bought this 32 years ago or so from the local comic book store where I lived, and I've kept it with me all this time. And actually, I think about a year and a half ago, Lynn and I, we played a game of elves versus orcs using the same set. And so now, to commemorate Blood Bowl 2nd Season, we're going to break out the game again, except this time we're playing Dwarf Giants versus Champions of Death. So it'll be sort of an interesting matchup between the pummeling brawn of the dwarves and the necromantic sorcery of the skeletons, who will end up getting pummeled into dust and then reconstituted and shoved back out on the field. So we'll see how that all works out. So for today's game, we're mostly going to be using the veterans rules that came with the box set, but we'll also be using some star players. We each have a star player on our team. And then I think we're using like the Dwarf Death Roller rules and maybe a couple other things from the Blood Bowl Companion. So that's the hodgepodge of rules we'll be using for today's game of classic 1988 Blood Bowl. And yeah, even after 32 years, it's still pretty fun. So I'm sure the new versions of the game have a lot more bells and whistles, but no regrets. It's been a lot of fun, and it's really neat to have still held on to it after all these years. So we hope you get a kick out of it too. Okay, well, let's take a quick look at today's teams. Then we'll get right to the game and show you some vintage Blood Bowl from the days of Rogue Trader and Lead Minis. So today, Lynn is going to be playing the Dwarf Giants, and so this is mostly a classic metal Blood Bowl team from the late 80s, except for this guy here. This is Grim Ironjaw, and I believe he was a star player that started in 3rd edition Blood Bowl. And what special abilities does he have as a star player on the Dwarf Giants team?
So for Grim Ironjaw, I chose block, which gives you +1 to any block roll and -1 on any block against you. Mighty Blow, which is if the block succeeds, subtract your Mighty Blow level from their armor roll. And Thick Skull, if the player is stunned, place him in the reserve box instead of the stunned box, or if he's KO'd, place him in the stunned box.
Okay, so he's a good blocker, he has Mighty Blow, and he can recover more quickly from being knocked onto the sidelines. So in the Blood Bowl 2nd Edition box set, you got a orc team, and you also got a human team. And as you can see, these particular guys have little colored rings that you put on their bases, and there's different rings based on different positions. So the miniatures were all the same, but this is how you tell what the various players are. So we're using that same color code system on the dwarves and the undead because skeleton and dwarves, they look very similar. So all of these red dwarves are blitzers. Those are the best athletes on the team. So they're pretty strong. They have good armor value, really good armor value, like a 10. And they can also sprint 3 spaces in addition to their regular movement of 3. These blockers, on the other hand, these green guys are tougher. They have a strength of 5. They can't sprint nearly as far. They can only sprint 1, and their armor value is also 10. And then you have the regular linemen who aren't as good as either of those guys. And then I sort of nudged Lynn. She was sort of reluctant to do it, but I sort of nudged her to take the Dwarf Death Roller because we had the old Death Roller mini from back in the day, and it's kind of quirky. You know, if you could connect with it, you could really squash somebody, but it's kind of hard getting it pointed in the right direction. So one of the linemen on the dwarf team has snuck off the field. He has commandeered the pitch roller from the maintenance crew, and he's going to be driving it onto the field, and he hopes to kind of plow under some skeletons. So this is the Dwarf Giants team, and they don't have any kickers, they don't have any throwers, they don't have any catchers, but they are pretty tough, and so they're just going to be basically a steamroller rolling across the pitch, trying to get that ball in the end zone. So facing off against the dwarves today is going to be the necromantic might of the Champions of Death. Now, by the time they hit 3rd edition Blood Bowl, the Champions of Death were a full box set of metal players. You got a mummy, you got some whites, there was a vampire, I think there was some zombies, some other stuff maybe. So the team had a lot of really cool metal sculpts sort of representing the various positions. In Blood Bowl 2nd edition, however, the Champions of Death were basically skeletons. And I don't even think they had some dedicated Blood Bowl skeletons. So what most people did, at least in my area, was they used these old Warhammer plastic skeletons for Warhammer Fantasy, which is why these guys are on square bases. It didn't occur to me at the time to put them on round bases, but they are on square bases. And I have colored the edges here. So the yellow guys, again, using the original color coding system, those are the catchers. And the white guys here with the white bases, they are the throwers. And the rest of these guys are all linemen. And you might notice that a couple of these linemen actually have some shoulder pads. Those are, commandeered Space Marine shoulder pads from the original plastic Space Marine box set. So as I mentioned, most of my team, most of the Champions of Death are skeletons. They're really not that tough, but they do have a certain amount of durability because they don't stay in the injury box for very long. So once you start knocking out skeletons and they go into KO'd or injured, they can actually kind of move down the track toward the reserve box pretty quickly. And so a Dwarf Blitzer, for example, might stomp a skeleton player into the ground on one turn, and then a turn or two later, see that same skeleton pop back onto the field. So they are pretty resilient in that fashion, but they just don't have the pure, raw, meaty fist pummeling power of the dwarves. So I'm not quite sure how well they're going to do. They do, however, have a mummy. Now, a skeleton team could actually have up to 2 mummies in Blood Bowl 2nd edition, but we're just taking 1. And mummy counts for 3 linemen. So if you have a mummy on your team, you have to forego 3 skeleton linemen. And we've also given the Champions of Death a star player. This is Viggo Mortis, and he is basically a regular skeleton lineman with a couple of abilities. So he has 1 level of block skill, which gives him a bonus on his blocking. He also has jump up, which means if he gets knocked face down into the dirt, normally if he's knocked down into the dirt, he's face down, and then the next turn he rolls over, and the next turn he stands up. Here he can just straight stand up, so he won't have to have that rollover phase during his recovery. We also gave him thick skull, which means if he's stunned, he goes to the reserve box instead of the stun box. And if he's KO'd, he goes to the stun box instead of the KO'd box. And I should mention that the mummy actually has mighty blow times 2 and toughness times 3. And the mummy also has something called tomb rot, which means because he is a moldering, centuries-old embalmed corpse, if a dwarf wants to try to block him, they have to roll a d6, and if they get a 1 through 4, they can block or tackle as normal. But if not, they simply say, no way. That may provide the mummy with some resistance. Now, if the mummy does actually injure a dwarf, then the dwarf has to make a roll at some point to see if he contracts tomb rot, which is more of a factor if you're doing a campaign game, a full season, because the dwarf might miss a few games. In this game, it's just going to be for the hilarity. Okay, so that is the Champions of Death, featuring a bunch of old Warhammer Fantasy skeletons on their square bases, as well as a 3rd edition Blood Bowl mummy and a 3rd edition Blood Bowl white, who's going to be a skeleton star player, which means he just has more meat on his bones. So that is Viggo Mortis and our mummy, Bubba Hotep, and a bunch of nameless skeletons, and they're ready to get on the pitch and play some Blood Bowl against those dwarves. Okay, well, here we are. We've pre-deployed our 2 teams. So here's the Champions of Death on this side and the Dwarf Giants on this side. And here is the Dwarf Death Roller, which has to deploy partially in the end zone. And Lynn, I know you're only taking that contraption to humor me, but think how great you'll feel if you actually get to squash somebody with that, if you get it all lined up and crunch a few skeletons. So
Perhaps. We will see.
So anyway, we are lined up, and instead of rolling for initiative, we're going to roll to see which team has the ball. And if the game goes really quickly, if someone scores right away, then we'll do a second possession. But if it runs long, if it's a big brawl and kind of a war of attrition, then we might just go for the first score. So we'll just see how it goes. But let's go ahead. I'm going to be using these vintage bony dice. And Lynn, you are going to be using your blue dice for the dwarves. And we'll roll 1 die. And the high score, I guess, can choose whether to have the football or not, though why you wouldn't have the football, I don't know. 1. Okay. So
I get the football.
the dwarves get the football. So all my catchers and throwers here for the Champions of Death probably aren't going to do that good, but Your dwarves tend to be more of a hammer and anvil type of team. They're just going to kind of grab the football and grind forward. And the only saving grace for the skeletons really is that they recover quickly. So once they get smashed and broken into pieces, then the ghouls on the sidelines will staple them back together and kick them back out on the field. So, all right. So decide which one of your players is going to be carrying that football.
The blitzer.
One of your blitzers. All right. Okay, so we begin with Dwarves turn 1. And I don't think you'll actually have a chance to block anybody. But go ahead and take your first move, and we'll get this game on the road here. And as we mentioned earlier, the dwarves with the red rim are the blitzers. The green guys are the blockers. This is Grim Ironjaw. That is the Dragon Slayer, who is your start player. He is a lineman, so he has a gray rim. And the rest of your linemen, I think, are back in reserves.
So I'm going to start with this blitzer here. He's got a movement of 3 and a sprint of 3.
So he's pretty speedy for a dwarf,
Yes.
actually.
Now the blocker's a little slower. He's still got a movement of 3, but he's only got a sprint of 1.
Okay. Now the thing about the dwarves, which we did a refresher game earlier this afternoon, and the dwarves are tough and strong and with a lot of armor. So I was able to knock them down occasionally, but I wasn't really able to injure them. The skeletons, on the other hand, are fragile, but they recover quickly. So we'll just see how that works out.
Another blitzer.
And you can have dwarf throwers and kickers, but the typical dwarf team is just blitzers and linemen and blockers. So the dwarf blockers are the strongest players on the field, with the exception of Bubba Hotep, the mummy.
My star player, who's a lineman, so he's got a movement of 3 and a sprint of 2.
And what else does he have, like Mighty Blow or something like that?
He's got block, mighty blow, and thick skull.
Okay.
And this blocker here.
That is a lot of dwarf blockers to have to contend with.
Blitzer. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Blocker. 1, 2, 3, and 1. Blitzer.
That's the guy who's currently carrying the football.
And he can sprint 3. 1, 2, 3. And another blocker. 1, 2, 3, and 1. And last but not least, so the interesting thing about the death roller is he's hard to control.
Right.
He can move up to 4 spaces, but I have to say how many spaces that's going to be before I do. Then I roll. If I roll below that, then he moves randomly.
And he goes out of control. So if the faster you move, the more damage you do if you connect with something, but also the more likely it is that you go out of control and have to kind of randomly careen around the field. So how many spaces are you going to move with the death roller?
So we're going to start going 2 forward.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yay!
6, you're fine. If you'd rolled a 1 or a 2, you would have gone out of control.
So he went 2 forward.
Okay. Okay, so that is the dwarf turn, correct?
Yes. So now what are the champions of death going to do?
All right, champions of death, turn 1. And since I didn't know whether we were going to get the ball or not, I have put some throwers out here. Those are the guys with the white bases. And some catchers. Those are the guys with the yellow bases. A couple of linemen. And then, of course, we have the mummy, Bubba Hotep, and my star player, Viggo Mortis. And then we got a bunch of linemen and other folks in reserve. And we'll have to see if we can stop this densely packed formation of dwarves that's rumbling down the field. So that is a heck of a lot of blitzers and blockers on the dwarf side, and my spindly little skeletons really don't have the strength to overpower them, but we'll do the best we can. So here's my star player here. That's Viggo Mortis, and he's just a skeleton lineman, but he has some special abilities, so he's got a little more meat on his bones, and I guess he's going to get in here, and we'll start attacking this wing of the dwarves, of the dwarven offensive. So he has a movement of 3 and a sprint of 2, so let's see what we can do here. I can't sprint into your tackle zone. It's kind of hard to see the squares here in the middle, but is that corner to corner? I can't quite tell.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So what I can do is I can move my regular 3. 1, 2, 3. I can sprint, and then take an extra move and move there, but risk injury. But I think we're going to do that. So I'm going to move up there, and I have to roll and not get a 6 to avoid being injured, and 4. So he's fine. So Viggo would like to go after this dwarf blocker, but he's going to need some help. So we're going to set up a multiple block here. Here's what we're going to do. The mummy, this is Bubba Hotep, He's going to move his 1, 2, 3. He can't sprint, but even if he could, you can't sprint into someone's tackle zone. But he's going to make that extra move to get in there so he can help Viggo Mortis attack that blocker. And so a 6 would not be good. 5. So they're both fine. So Bubba Hotep here has a strength of 6. Viggo Mortis has a strength of 3, so that's a total of 9. Your blocker's strength is 5, is that correct?
Yes.
So with Viggo's level 1 block skill, that should give us a +5 on the die roll. And we'll see what happens. 10. Defender is knocked over, so that blocker is knocked over, knocked face down. So Bubba Hotep has Mighty Blow level 2. Your armor value is what, 10? So now it's 8. So you need to get an 8 or less on your armor roll.
Of course
and
I
you didn't.
So then I roll on the injury chart.
Now we roll on the injury chart and we add 1 because that's half of the Mighty Blow. 4. Stunned. You are merely stunned after all of that. So one of your dwarf blockers is now in the stun box in the dugout.
But now you've used your 2 big players.
I have. So I don't know what the rest of the skeletons are going to be able to do.
Wasn't for Mighty Blow, I would have been fine.
Yes, dwarves have a lot of armor. It took a star player and a mummy to bring that dwarf down. So these 2 catchers here have a movement of 4 and a sprint of 3, so they're just going to go tearing down the sidelines here. I'm being recklessly optimistic that I'm going to get my hands on the ball and maybe throw it. So who has the ball? Which guy has the ball? Way the heck over there. All right. This defense is called the Wall of Bones. I'm going to gang up if I can. So that is 2 skeleton linemen trying to block this dwarf here, and he is what, a blitzer? So these 2 linemen together have a strength of 6, and your blitzer has a strength of
4.
4. So I get a +2. So that is 7, and I think that's nothing, right?
Standoff, nothing happens.
There's the clattering of bones against dwarven steel, but nothing happens. So Grim Ironjaw is your star player. The skeleton lineman, let's see. I don't think he can get help from anybody. 1, 2, 3,
Yeah, you could if you
4,
did that.
5, and did an extra. So what I can do is I can move regular 3 movement. I can dance around while I'm doing my sprint, and then I can take an extra move, a dangerous move there, but I got to roll a die and not get a 6. 5, so he's okay. So this thrower and this lineman both have a strength of 3, and your strength on Grim Ironjaw is what?
Is 4, but he's got block, so you get -1 to any block roll you do.
Okay, so he's essentially got a strength of 5 because he has block skill. So a 6 versus a 5, I got a +1, and that would be a 3. That's not good.
4 or less attackers are knocked over.
So both of these guys went running into Grim Ironjaw and got blasted backwards. He gave them each a nice big meaty fist right in the jaw, and so they went flying. So that is 2 armor rolls. So Grim Ironjaw actually has Mighty Blow. So if he was doing the blocking, then when the skeletons made their armor roll, they'd get a penalty. But because they tried to block him, according to the letter of the rules, that doesn't apply. So they still need a 7 for their armor roll. So we'll start with the thrower there in the white. And he does not make his armor roll. I'll just do the other guy. And he does. So the thrower has to roll on the injury chart.
It would be funny if he got knocked out.
Killed.
Yeah, he got killed going against Ironjaw.
Okay, so 2 to 6 is stunned, 7 to 8 is KO'd, 9 to 11 is serious injury, and 12 is dead. So that's a 6, so that is stunned, and fortunately for a skeleton, stun doesn't mean that much. But he'll go into the stun box for now anyway. Who else do I have? Anybody? I got this lineman, right, and this thrower. We'll just go ahead and move 5. Normal movement, plus a sprint, and the thrower, same thing. Okay, so I think that is the end of the first turn for the Champions of Death, and so now we go back to the Dwarf Giants.
Need to clear some space.
You need to punch a hole. So here's Grim Ironjaw. Here is the blitzer with the ball. That's a couple of linemen right there. That's a catcher. That's another lineman. That's a thrower. So defenses are kind of slim. So unless the heavy hitters for the Champions of Death can make their way to that end of the field, the Dwarves might be setting up a pretty quick score here. So, All right, so Dwarves turn 2. So I guess you can start by, do you have anybody? You got one guy in the stunned box, and he can move in to the reserve box, and one reservist can move out.
So we're going to bring a blocker back out.
You're just past midfield with the football, which is right there.
So we're going to try to get rid of some of those skeletons that are in front of my blitzer. So we're going to start out bringing some of these guys over. I'm going to take a blitzer, 1, 2, 3, and gang up on this guy.
So you're going to gang up on the skeleton that's lying on the ground?
No, this guy
Oh,
over
that guy over there, okay. One small correction here. The skeleton should have been face down after he failed to block Iron Jaw. So we're going to turn him face down, and he will turn face up on the next Champions of Death turn.
And then my blocker's going to go up here and join him.
All right.
So that's 9 against what's your defense on this guy?
They only have a strength of 3, so that is a blocker with a strength of 5 and a blitzer with a strength of 4 versus a skeleton lineman with a strength of 3. So you get plus 6 on your die roll. So, stunned.
15. And now we're going to gang up on your prone guy.
With a blocker.
2,
3.
3.
There you go.
Okay.
So now our blitzer is moving up to also block that prone skeleton, so that's a multiple block. And that guy's prone, so he's even more vulnerable. So his strength is 3. You have
9
plus 6.
again.
Yeah.
So plus 6. So,
So
16.
on the prone table, that is injured. So you have stomped him into oblivion. Fortunately, though, skeletons can find their way back into the game. The ghouls kind of staple them together, nail them, tack them, glue them, duct tape them, and kick them back out on the field. So that's a box formation of blitzers and blockers trying to punch a hole for the ball carrier, who is over here, I guess. And trying to prevent your march into the field is a skeleton lineman, another skeleton lineman, a skeleton catcher, and a skeleton thrower. So are you scared yet?
I'm going to take Grim Ironjaw
Mm-hmm.
and attack this guy here.
That's skeleton lineman. Okay, the skeleton lineman has a strength of 3. Grim Ironjaw has a strength of 4, plus he's got block skill, so that gives you a plus 2 on your roll. 11. Defender is knocked over. So that skeleton is knocked over. So skeleton normally has an armor value of 7, now it's 6 because Ironjaw has Mighty Blow. So 7, he didn't make it. So the skeleton lineman is knocked down. He missed his armor roll, so now he needs a roll on the injury chart. And 8 is KO'd. So he is KO'd.
So now I'm going to see if I can gang up on this guy. We'll see if we can get enough people there to gang up on him.
That poor little catcher.
So we're going to move the guy with the ball there.
Okay.
And then...
Now the other thing you can do is you can do a shoulder charge. So that guy with the ball could block at a -1 on that skeleton catcher and then keep moving, right? Which means you move up, 1, 2, you block, and if the block is successful and you knock that guy over, then you can continue moving. So you could move there.
I thought about doing a shoulder charge, but I want to pile in, so I'm not going to do that.
Okay. So no shoulder charge. You're just going to run up and block.
And then this guy's going to go 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
So 2 blitzers at 4 each is 8.
Versus that little catcher with a strength of 2, so you have a plus 6 on your die roll. Okay,
16.
so he's stunned. He knocked his block off. Okay, so these 2 blitzers knocked out that skeleton catcher. There's the ball holder right here. Here's your star player. And so you've punched a pretty good hole on the sidelines there to make a run for it. Now, who still has to move out of all of this? This dwarf blocker has to move, that blocker has to move, and this one as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, so his movement of 3. And then he can sprint for 3.
Blocker can only sprint 1.
Blocker can sprint 1, so he's going right there.
Okay.
And then...
So that's another lumbering blocker.
And he'll sprint for 1.
And then there's the blocker over there that you just brought in from reserves.
And sprint for 1.
Okay.
And then what the heck, we're going to try for 4 with the roller.
Okay.
See if we can run over a mummy or 2.
Oh, yeah.
A mummy and a star player.
All right, so your plan is to fire up the death roller, try to move forward 4, and eventually, if these guys don't move out of the way, squash that mummy.
Or I could turn and try to squash your catchers.
You could. I think you'd have a hard time catching the catchers, but by all means, do your worst. 5. Oh, you did it. You moved
I did it.
Straight 4. Had you rolled 4, 3, 2, or 1, then you would have careened out of control.
Yes.
Okay. The dwarf death roller moving forward toward the mummy and Vigo Mortis. So that is the end of the dwarves' turn, correct?
Yes.
So now it is Champions of Death, turn 2. So one of the good things about being a skeleton, if there is one, is that you can be pieced back together. So all of these stunned skeletons move into the reserve box.
And even your injured guy can come out.
The KO'd guy needs to roll, but 1 to 3, so he goes to the stun box. And this injured guy gets to go to the KO'd box because he's a skeleton. So how many skeletons do I have on the field? Not that many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've only got 6 skeletons on the field? Wow.
You killed a couple of your own. You knocked a couple of your own out.
I did. They crashed into the wall of dwarves. So I'm going to move 3 linemen and 1 thrower out of the reserve box and try to replenish my diminished forces. So unfortunately, your ball carrier is way over here, and Bubba Hotep, the mummy, he only moves 3 and he can't sprint, so he can't get over there. But what he can do is pummel the closest guy to him, so he's going to try to do that. So let's see. Again, these lines are a little funky, but I think he's going to try to attack this dwarf blocker over here.
Are you going to bring your other guy in?
I think Bubba Hotep is just going to attack on his own. So he has a strength of 6. You have a strength of 5 with your blocker, so I get a +1, and we just need a good roll here. And 6.
Does he get +1 on the block, too?
The mummy has mighty blow and toughness, but he doesn't have block.
Okay.
So a 6 is a standoff.
Right.
So
nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
Blah, 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 blah.
Oh, don't be like that. That's poor sportsmanship. Would that work? 1, 2, 3?
That would.
Okay, so he's going to go diagonal there.
So you could have ganged up if you would have.
I could have. I was going to try to save him for something else.
Oh, okay.
So Vigo Mortis has a strength of 3 plus 1 level of block skill, but this dwarf blocker over here has a strength of 5. So we're not going to try to block him just yet. I think Vigo is just going to stand pat for the moment. Okay, so I have a lineman here. I have a thrower there. I have 3 linemen and a thrower over here. I have 2 catchers here. So what are we going to do? The lineman and the thrower each have a sprint of 2, so they can move a total of 5, plus some extras if they want to take a chance on being injured. What is the strength on the death roller?
8.
8. Yeah, these guys aren't strong enough to tip it over, unfortunately.
Squishy, squishy.
So they're going to sprint toward the end zone, which was the instructions they were given. They're not that calculating. They don't have a lot of free will. So the necromancer coach just said, get into the end zone. So that's where they're going. There's a lineman. I suppose he should try to do something. I guess what he's going to do is go there, and he'll try to gang up on that guy with the help of this thrower. So there's the ball holder. So that is a skeleton lineman with a strength of 3. That is a skeleton thrower who also has a strength of 3. And your blitzer has a strength of
4.
4. So I get a +2 on the roll. Maybe we can make something happen here. Maybe we can get a lucky scatter. So 7, 8, 9. I think that knocks you over. Multiple block table. 9 or more, defender is knocked over. So I did knock over the ball carrier.
Okay, so then
that ball is going to scatter.
But I roll on the injury chart first.
Yeah, roll your armor roll. Your armor is 10, so you're fine. And let's look up the scatter rules because I forget right off the top of my head. We're going to roll a d6 to determine which direction it goes, and then 2d6 to determine how far it goes. So it's going to go this direction, and then roll 2d6 for distance. 9. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Wow. That's bad for me.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, way to go, skeleton lineman.
Yeah.
Okay, well, just when all seemed lost, a plucky skeleton thrower and a skeleton lineman got in there, knocked over that dwarf blitzer. The ball scattered way the heck over here. I guess that is the end of my turn, though. So now it is the Dwarf Turn 3, and see if you can recover from that mishap.
It's going to be kind of tough. Let's see. So he rolls over.
Yeah, so the dwarf gets his face out of the dirt, turns face up. So no one comes in from reserves.
So we're just going to start scrambling for the ball.
So in a shocking turn of events, the dwarf team watched their ball carrier get knocked over by a couple of skeletons. Then they had to watch the ball bounce free, and now they have to kind of run after it. So the blockers are going as fast as they can on their short little legs. But fortunately, the blitzers are a little bit faster. They can sprint 3. So there's Grim Ironjaw, the dwarf star player, heading toward the ball. So yeah, so these green guys again are all blockers. That red dude is a blitzer. Your star player, Grim Ironjaw, is a lineman with special powers, and that's a blitzer. So there's a veritable stampede of heavily armored dwarves charging toward the football, ready to trample any skeleton that gets in their way. Man, you have a lot of blockers. It's a good thing they don't move very fast. So if you move him, then that thrower will get a chance to tackle, unless you back up.
Yeah, if I back up, you don't.
Because if you move from one square in his tackle zone to another one, he can try to tackle you, or you can kind of back up.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2.
Can he sprint? Oh yeah, blitzers can sprint 3. That's crazy.
So that's, oh, and then
The death roller.
he's going to try to go 4 again.
And
he
no,
didn't make it.
He's out of control. So now what he needs to do is, for each movement he tried to make, which was 4 squares forward, he needs to roll a d6, and that'll determine what direction he's going.
So a 5, he swings right.
Okay.
A 5, he swings right.
Okay.
A 3, he goes straight. And a 5, he swings right.
Well, at least you're aiming at those roughly
Catches.
at those 2 catchers.
Yes.
Okay. So Champions of Death, turn 3, bottom of turn 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8, 9, 10. Don't forget those guys. So I can bring in 1 guy. So in the stunned box, I have a lineman. He's going to move to reserves. So this KO'd guy, I can move him 1 box automatically, but I'm going to roll to see if I can get him all the way over. And 6, yeah, he goes all the way to reserves. Okay, so I'm going to move this lineman, put him there in preparation for some sort of mad scramble for the ball. The skeletons can't believe their good fortune. They're like, what? We thought it was all over. We thought we were going to be reconstituted into bone broth, but here we are. Okay, now what do I need to do? Because there's basically a wall of muscle and steel right here that's ready to grind us into paste. But before that happens, the skeletons are going to nab the football. So this thrower has movement of 3. 1, 2, 3. He can sprint 1, pick up that football. Whoops. Scatter. And move 1 again. And so he's going to do that. So this guy has the football. After all movement, tackles, and blocks have been completed, a player who is holding the football may throw it or hand it to a fellow player in an adjacent square. So these catchers are going to move their full movement plus their sprint. Now that fortunes have changed, though there is a death roller bearing down on them, so that's that. Bubba Hotep is going to move here, and he's going to block that blitzer. So his strength is 6. That blitzer's strength is 4. Plus 2. Oh, wow. Attacker is knocked over. So he's knocked over. Now the mummy has to make an armor roll. He made it, so at least he's not injured, but still not very impressive, Bubba Hotep. Vigo Mortis is going to move back here to help form a defensive line. These 2 linemen are going to gang up on this blocker here. So they have a total of 6 versus your 5, so plus 1. 12. Stunned. So they stun that blocker. Wow. This lineman here, the skeleton lineman, is going to move here, and he is going to try to block Grim Ironjaw. He has a strength of 3. What do you have?
4.
So Grim Ironjaw has block skill, so that gives me a -1. So I have 3 versus you're technically 5, so -2 on my roll, and 2. So that is an attacker is stunned effect, so he ran into Grim Ironjaw's fist, and he is stunned. And then this one lineman way over here, he's going to move his regular 3, going to sprint 2, and that's that. So at the end,
Can you pass?
he can pass.
It's a long bomb.
It's a long bomb from the skeleton thrower to these skeleton catchers. Long bomb. But the only good thing is he is a thrower. They are catchers. So I do get a little bit of a bonus here. So we're looking on the chart. The skeleton thrower has a throwing skill of 0 as opposed to -1 for everyone else. And the skeleton catcher has a coolness of 0 as opposed to a -1 for everybody else. So skeletons apparently aren't known for their passing game. So we are attempting to throw a long bomb to, let's say, we'll say the skeleton on the outside here because he's further away from the death roller. Long bomb, 9 to 12. 3.
Missed. It would be intercepted.
It would be intercepted. There's no one to catch it, though. So the thrower threw the ball to this guy. He missed, so it's going to scatter. I will just place it. And do you want to roll for the scatter?
Okay.
1. So it's going to go back this way and roll 2d6 to determine how far it scatters. 6. So 1. Let's see, what was that? Right? 1, 2. I can't tell.
3, 4, 5,
6.
6. So it's under his head, but he's not in that
but he's
square.
not in that square. Okay.
So that was better for me.
Okay, so the ball has scattered. So Bubba Hotep does not realize how close he is to the ball because his face is in the dirt. Yeah, that was a little bit of a long shot anyway, but yeah, so the ball was thrown here, bounced back this way. The dwarves are all running this way. Had they stayed where they were, they probably would have ended up with the ball.
Yep.
Okay, so it is now Dwarf Turn 4. So this guy stands up. The Splitzer stands up.
I'm one guy down, so I can bring one guy in.
Okay.
And now we got to see if we can get the ball and get away with it.
So Lynn was asking a question about tomb rot, and one of the powers that mummies have is they have tomb rot, which makes some players reluctant to block them. Any player wishing to tackle or block a mummy must roll a d6 to overcome fear of infection. On a result of 1 to 4, the player may attack as normal. On 5 or 6, he refuses to.
So first things first, we're going to go get the ball.
Okay.
So he's
That's a
doing
blitzer.
his 3, and
All right.
then he can move another 3. 1, 2,
Okay.
3 with his sprint.
Right. Normally he couldn't sprint in someone's tackle zone, but the mummy is knocked over, so he has no tackle zone. Okay. So the ball is now in the hands of the Splitzer.
Yes. So now I got to block out all those other guys that are in my face here.
You got to eliminate all these scrawny skeletons. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. These 2 blitzers
Yeah.
are going to gang up on this lineman.
Okay.
So they've got a strength of 8.
Versus his 3, so +5. So that's
11.
11. So 11, that's defender knocked over. So you knocked him over. Face down. And his armor value is 7. And he doesn't do it. So roll on the injury chart. 8. KO'd. He's KO'd. Okay, that's these 2 guys.
So Ironjaw is going to attack this lineman here. He's got a strength of 4 versus your strength of
3.
plus he gets +1 for block skill.
Okay.
So 5 to 3, so +2. Ooh.
5.
5 to 7 standoff, nothing happens.
Okay. So Ironjaw crashed into that skeleton, but it's a standoff. That's a particularly sturdy skeleton there, apparently.
So these 2 blockers are going to gang up on this thrower.
All right. So that is 10 versus his strength of 3, so you get a +7. 17. Okay. Since those 2 dwarves joined forces to block that skeleton, that block was resolved on the multiple block table. Had it been resolved on the regular block table, a result of 12 or more would have meant the skeleton was stunned. But on the multiple block table, the skeleton is knocked down, and now he needs to make an armor roll. And he does, so he's just knocked over.
This blitzer is going to attack your lineman.
All right.
4 to 3, so +1.
Mm-hmm.
So 9. I think that's a...
Defender knocked over. So that lineman is knocked over. Armor roll of 7, he makes it. So these two blockers, so they were attacking that lineman, and then this blitzer attacked that lineman there, and the result was both those skeletons are face down in the dirt. So that's what's going on there.
I've got these 2 left, so my blocker is going to try to get into the action.
Okay.
And...
the death roller.
he may as well try to go 4 again.
Okay. Moving forward 4.
Nope.
Does not do it, so he is...
A 2 is swing left. Okay. 4 is go straight. 3 is go straight.
Okay.
And 2 is swing left.
All right.
He's just spinning in circles. You sure we're not on ice?
Right. So is that all the dwarves?
That is all the dwarves.
Okay. And what did these guys do?
They're just staying there to protect the ball.
Right, okay. Okay, so now it is a Champions of Death, bottom of the 4th. Bottom of the 4th turn, Champions of Death. We're going to start by moving this stunned guy over here.
Rolling for your KO
Rolling
guy.
for the KO'd guy. 1, so he goes to stunned. How many guys do I have on the field? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I can bring on 2. So we'll take a recently repaired skeleton lineman and a skeleton thrower and bring them out of the reserve box and onto the field. Bubba Hotep the mummy rolls over, but he can't stand up yet.
And then these guys roll over.
And those skeletons roll over, so they're face up. Yeah, this thrower can sprint 2, so he's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This lineman here, I think he's going to help block Grim Ironjaw. So together, those 2 linemen have a strength of 6. So Grim Ironjaw has block skill, so he's technically got a strength of 5 for blocking purposes. So we get a +1 on our roll. And we have rolled a 7.
Standoff, nothing happens.
Nothing happens. Vigo Mortis is going to block that blocker. Vigo has a strength of 3 plus block skill. The blocker has a strength of 5, so -1 on the roll. 6. Standoff, nothing happens. This lineman here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And same with this thrower. A movement of 3 plus a sprint of 2. These catchers can move a little bit faster. I don't know what good it's going to do, but the necromancer coach on the sidelines is going to send them screaming toward the action anyway. So all the skeletons are racing up to try to help, and maybe we'll get a lucky scatter. We don't know. So I think that's all the undead. So now we would move to Dwarf Turn 5. And you have the ball. This blitzer has the ball. So you should be in a good position to basically bulldoze your way to the end zone. So let's see if you can do it.
Let's see if I can take out some skeletons first.
Okay.
Just 'cause.
So let's take a closer look at the action. We have a blitzer here, an unnamed blitzer, who has ended up with the ball, and he's within sight of the end zone. So victory is in his grasp. Poor Bubba Hotep is flat on his back, and so he's not much help. And here's a bunch of skeletons, and they need to somehow get through these dwarves to get to that ball. And there's one lonely thrower over there, one skeleton thrower, who would really like to tackle the ball carrier if the opportunity presented itself.
So this blocker is going to block this skeleton.
Okay, so just because I pointed him out, now this blocker is going to go try to block that poor thrower, who has a strength of 3 versus your 5. So you get a +2. 12. Stunned. That is a stunned. All right, so much for that.
So this blocker is going to block Vigo Mortis.
All right.
He's got 5.
Versus Vigo's 3, so that gives you a +2.
So 9. Defender is knocked over.
Defender's knocked over, so Vigo gets knocked over. He has to make an armor roll. And he does.
This blacker is going to block this prone.
You're going to block that prone skeleton?
Yep.
Just to be mean?
Yes.
Just to crunch the bones? All right. He has a strength of 3.
So +2. 7.
7 on the prone block table is nothing happens.
Okay.
Huh.
We'll try one more time with this blocker.
This other one. He could help get the ball at the end zone, but he's going to stomp on the skeleton instead. 4, 5, 6. So that's also nothing happens.
Also nothing. It's one pretty solid skeleton.
It's a resilient skeleton. He's been duct taped together so many times. Who else you got?
This blitzer is going to try to stomp this skeleton, so it's a +1.
+1. 11 is pretty good on the prone. Defending player is injured, remove him from the board. So you booted his head. It's not funny. Why are you laughing at someone else's misfortune?
2, 3. And then he's going to roll to go here so he can attack that poor prone skeleton.
Okay. So he did his movement. He sprinted his 1. Now he's going to take an extra roll. He needs to roll a 6. If you'd roll a 6, you would have been injured. You're not. And now you can stomp that skeleton.
Okay, so +2. 6.
6.
Nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
It's one resilient skeleton.
That's right. His plan is to tie up as many dwarves as possible by letting them stomp on him.
So this blocker is going to try to stomp that skeleton.
All right. So you have a +2 on your roll. 10. That is knocked over. So you knocked him over. Armor roll. Doesn't make his armor roll. 7 on the injury table is KO'd. So he is KO'd.
Okay. So this blitzer is going to run for the end zone.
All right.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, he sprints into the end zone. So this plucky blitzer here, who was lucky enough to have the ball scatter near him, nabbed it up, sprinted into the end zone, and now he is the MVP. So good for him. And the death roller, unfortunately, was not that useful, though it would have been fun to see him kind of crush a mummy or run over some of his own guys. And Bubba Hotep, unfortunately, did not live up to his reputation. He didn't punch any dwarves into oblivion, and he didn't infect anybody with tomb rot, which would have been hilarious.
And Grim Ironjaw did okay. His extra block skill definitely came in handy both on defense and on offense.
Yeah. This is actually, I think we mentioned before, this is actually maybe a Blood Bowl 3rd edition miniature. So there is no Grim Ironjaw stats for 2nd edition, but we pulled him back in time a few years and made up our own stats, and it's kind of fun to see him on the field with a lot of these other kind of vintage metal dwarf minis, so he fits right in. Okay, folks, well, that was our grand Dwarf Giants versus Champions of Death matchup, playing Blood Bowl 2nd edition from 1988, so 32 years ago. So yeah, from what I understand, the very latest version of Blood Bowl 2nd season, is due to hit stores here in November of 2020. But I have to admit that our heart is still stuck in the late 80s to early 90s, and so it's a lot of fun for us to break out this old version of Blood Bowl and show you what the game was like back in the day. So folks, as always, thank you very much for stopping by. If you like the things we do here, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please give this video a big thumbs up. And of course, please visit us online at our website, skirmishwargames.com.